Alright everyone, so this is basically a sad time for the Saw franchise, especially as we were all expecting in anticipation for Saw 11, but now with Saw 11 it is cancelled. It is no longer happening, and even though with the franchise it is basically dead at this point forever. And so I'm going to be breaking down of how this news came to be, the timeline of events leading up to the cancellation for Saw 11, or what could have been the potential for this franchise to be back on track, and there's so much more to break down right here as well. And so if you're new, then be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss on any future bits. But now let's hop right into it. And now with Saw, that is one of the most iconic horror movie franchises of all time, and even though specifically we go into these movies for the traps and the big twists, and of course John Kramer's Jigsaw played by Tobin, because especially for what that franchise has built upon, especially bringing in characters, and even with this franchise that has built like connections to each character. But even though with Saw 1 that remains the most greatest horror movies of all time, especially directed by James Wan. He's like the horror mastermind, especially with that movie, and that was about two people getting caught in traps, of having to play a Jigsaw's games on how to escape the traps, and even though that with twists and turns that are revealed about these two people, and that's how it led a good start for the franchise. But even though after the first couple of movies like the Saw 2 and Saw 3, it basically went downhill from there, and even though that it introduced Hoffman, but even though after that, but even with the film series that became profitable, but even after that, it was absolute nonsense. I mean, I'm talking about like with the underdeveloped characters, and just with like so many ideas that the creative team has, or the producers, like throwing like nonsense that didn't make sense to the story, or having these like ridiculous traps, or having these like plot points or deep plot holes that have nothing to do with the main storyline, especially for the franchise overall. But even though I like what James Wan did with the very first movie, and that set up a start for the franchise, and that with Jigsaw and Spiral remain one of the worst movies in the franchise. But even though with Spiral, that was the final nail in the coffin, and that was Chris Rock in that film, and even though, I mean, the franchise went downhill after that, let's face it there. In 2023, they returned with Saw 10, aka Saw X, which I really did like, because even though I really liked that movie, it was a great movie since the original, that it brought back Tobin Jigsaw, and it was a great comeback for him, because we didn't see much throughout the entire series. But I'm glad that they brought him back. And even though with that movie, that was taking place in between the first two installments, and even though what storyline to serve there of trapping all these like medical people in traps on how to escape them, but even though I liked Jigsaw, the puppet that right on the motorcycle, it says this: "Do you want to play a game?" And that's one of the most iconic lines from the series, and even though that's like the main slogan from the entire franchise. And even though I really did like Saw 10, with critics and audiences responding to that movie, and it goes over $100 million worldwide, and that movie, it teased good stuff coming to this franchise and more. And even though with that post-credit scene that brought back Hoffman, and even though that was going to be set up for more future installments, and basically from there, and even though that people go to these movies every year for a Saw movie, because this franchise has become profitable and people enjoyed the heck out of these movies. And now what the question may be is, how did it get to here? Well, 3 months after Saw 10 came out, and after it was a success financially, and it was announced that an 11th installment is happening, aka Saw 11, was going to be released on September 27th, 2024. But then leading up towards that, it got delayed by 1 year, September of 2025, which was this calendar year. But even though with everything that was happening behind the scenes, as reports have come out, especially I think back in January of 2024, which was last year, is that with the studios and the producers had so much conflict and arguments back and forth, and that really caused a rumor speculation if they were to cancel Saw 11. And now with Saw 11, it is no longer happening. with this news, because I think with Bloody Disgusting that they broke the news first, but even though I think hours after the news broke, their website crashed, their servers were not working, and so I mean, even though I gotta give credit to Bloody Disgusting for breaking the news first, because they're always the best indicate for a media news outlet. But even though with Saw 11 that is no longer happening, but even though it was gonna bring back a Tobin Bell's Jigsaw and bringing in all these characters, they were getting everything into production. But now with the franchise, it is basically over, and I'm pretty sure it is dead at this point. But even though with Saw 10, that became like success. It goes over $100 million worldwide, and even though people are like, why would you cancel it? Like, Saw X was like a big success and a great comeback for this franchise. And even though after nonsense movies before that, even though we gotta say the obvious. I mean, the franchise was basically a nonsense even before Saw X came along, but even though people like that movie and people wanted to see more of that, even though for what happens now, because I think like that means no more sequels, no more prequels or anything like that. But even though I am gonna miss this franchise, it was a consistently good franchise that people show up to these movies every single year, especially in the early 2000s. Like, they would pump out these movies every single year. But I liked what Tobin Bell brought to the role as John Kramer, as Jigsaw. His performance remains iconic for that horror movie character. And even though with that franchise, especially from the upgraded traps and what kind of different creativity that they do with kills, and some which are gory as well, and some are bloody. I like this franchise, but even though as we look around ourselves, especially what the franchise has led into, but even if we were to get a Saw 11 like this year in 2025, it would have been so good, and we would have had a continuation storyline with Tobin Bell's Jigsaw, and especially with Hoffman that was teased at the end of Saw 10 in the post-credit scene, as I just mentioned. But even though that there will be no more Saw movies moving forward, which is a kind of sad thing to even think about, because even if 10 to 15 years down the line, if the franchise were to get rebooted and sold to another studio, that they would have to start over from scratch. Another production company would do with this franchise. But again, I mean, the franchise is dead, I mean, for at least for now. But even if they were to reboot it sometime in the near future, I would be happy about that. But it was basically gone downhill, so I think like it is for the best. At least this franchise ended on a good note with Saw 10, that had the amazing return of Tobin Bell's Jigsaw and had all its dedicated focus on him. And I really liked what the last movie delivered, and how they went all in on the traps, make it so much more creative. And yeah, I mean, that's all I say about it. It is kind of sad that the Saw franchise is basically done, but even though that this franchise will always be remembered for all the Saw fans out there, but even though I am gonna miss it, and it's such a bummer that we'll never be able to get another Saw movie. Even if we did, I'd be happy with it. But now, at least for now, we should all be remembering this franchise once and for all as well. But that's gonna do it for this video. Just let me know in the comments below, and what are your thoughts on Saw 11 not happening and the franchise being basically over, it's dead, or sometime it'll reboot in the near future, but we'll never know. Just let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe and turn on notifications about future videos. And also follow all my social media, it's all linked down below. And with that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.